All right, welcome to ClubTest Debrief, where our editors and writers put the latest gear through their paces and offer their insights on the testing experiences and standout products heading into 2024. Today, we are continuing the conversation with James Colgan, Big Game James. He is a news and features editor at golf.com. You are a fellow lefty. You're also you're also a fellow tall guy, which I can always appreciate. So I'm like selfishly, I'm interested in your insights, but you had a chance to go to the Kingdom, which is for anybody that plays TaylorMade gear out there, that is TaylorMade Mecca. It's where all the tour pros go when they head to TaylorMade HQ. That's where you did your fitting. What were you hoping to accomplish when you stepped foot on the grounds at the Kingdom when it came to your gear?
John, I broke 80 for the first time in my life about a month and a half ago, which was a massive development. And so my game has been trending in like the best direction it's ever been trending. But there are a few weaknesses that just have kind of consistently started to pop up as my game has grown more and more consistent. The things that have gone wrong have grown more and more consistent. And so going into this fitting, my big push was, okay, now that I have some consistency with my swing, what are the things that I can find to improve my consistency across the board? Cut down on my dispersion a little bit, see if I can improve on some of my launch data that I have never really paid that much attention to, but I probably should pay more attention to. And yeah, some of my learnings were pretty incredible considering.
I think one of the biggest ones, and being there and witnessing part of that, we're trying to stay out of the way as I tend to. I don't want to overhang when the fittings are going on. Started with your driver, because you had a previous TaylorMade driver. You had the Stealth carbon face technology, but the settings of that driver and that model were something that a lot of golfers don't assume that they would go to, like the max model. They would go to the more forgiving model, but in your case, because of where you strike it on the club face and create launch conditions, you actually needed the spin to create more lift and more distance, which also led to more accuracy as well.
First of all, the first thing I noticed when I tried the Qi10 for the first time, the look at address is incredible. And there's like a white line that runs across the face. And I don't know, I'm sure it's an alignment aid of some kind, but I was not.
Most definitely is.
Yeah, nobody explained to me what it was. But the confidence boost that I got just from seeing that, I'm not someone who worries about whether or not I'm going to make contact with the ball when I'm standing over it. But it felt like I was maybe a little bit more oriented on, okay, where's my starting line? What am I looking for? So that was the first thing that I saw when I started. Then as my fitting progressed, I kind of worked through the shaft. I worked through, figuring out the different things that worked for me. And one of the big things that we kind of figured out right away was that I could maintain the same launch characteristics I'd had, the same amount of speed, the same amount of distance, the same amount of spin, but I could improve all of the things that were kind of struggles for me in my game. I could have a much more consistent height. I could have a much more consistent landing angle. My carry would be just as good, or if not better than it was, but I could get a lot more roll out of the ball once it landed on the fairway. And these are all things that I've been dealing with over the last, 2 years playing golf that I just thought were parts of my game. I thought when my ball landed in the fairway and it stopped kind of there, I was like, oh, I guess that's what it does when my ball lands. So to see suddenly that at the end of this fitting, by just making a few small tweaks, the big thing was we cut down the length by 1/2 inch. It's kind of surprising because when you're using a driver, normally you would think longer is better. But by shortening down, I was able to get the same performance, actually even slightly better performance with my ball speed, with my angle of attack, with all of this good stuff that you want for smash factor, for distance, all that stuff. By just making those small tweaks, I was able to maintain all of the good stuff I had, and I was able to cut my dispersion literally in half. It was crazy. We were hitting drives out there. There was one, I'll never forget it. The first swing with the Qi10 Max, I absolutely piped a drive. I mean, this is maybe the best swing I've had with the driver in my hands in 2 years. And I just looked at Arrow, my fitter, and I said, I don't think I need to swing anymore. I think I'm fine.
We're good.
We don't need to keep going. And yeah, I never expected that I was going to have that. And I never thought that part of the way I would be getting that was not by seeing these incremental gains in distance or in speed or in yardage or any of that, but by kind of aiming for some of the bigger picture things that matter more to me, which is hitting the ball straighter, maybe finding the fairway or even the first cut, as opposed to being 2 fairways over on the left. Those sorts of small changes made such a huge benefit for me in just like the span of 5 or 10 swings. It was really incredible.
And that's where fitting tools with a golf club are so important, especially you, not just the shaft length as well, which obviously you experience, and the settings. Is we're not just trying to get you to swing the golf club faster and produce ideal launch conditions. We're also trying to have you produce the same golf swing that you always make, but find those inconsistencies and hit it in the middle of the face more often as well. We saw that with the Stealth HD with Nelly Korda. Like, she switched to that driver because it helped her with her, like, the spin number she was looking for. And for you went to the max and saw greater consistency, as well as through the adjustments and with the shaft change and length change, all of a sudden you're hitting the middle more often. And at the end of the day, that's, as you said, you're looking for that consistency and you just found it.
Absolutely. I could also feel the weight distribution was a little bit different behind the max. And I know that's meant to kind of cut down on people who hit slices. I'm not like a pretty bad slicer, I would say. I kind of am more of the push fade than anything else. But feeling that weight distribution kind of behind the club, again, these are not things that I'm like used to thinking about when I'm swinging a golf club. It was hard for me to kind of figure out the vernaculars. I was in the middle of doing it. But as I was swinging that club in particular, you can actually see the face is a slightly different shape. It feels a little bit different when you're kind of like wiggling it around before you give it a rip for the first time. And once I
sounds like Tiger Woods right here. He's talking about the feels here. How the golf club feels in his hands. Continue, James.
I mean,
something to come with Tiger now.
And before I swung the club for the first time, I genuinely, because the look was so different. And again, I was playing just a regular Stealth. So the Qi10 regular, the head looked very familiar to me. So I was not expecting to be hitting the max any better than I was hitting the regular Qi10. But once I gave it a rip, I could see immediately there was some sort of correction happening in the downswing.
When we talk about the tech of the drivers, there are 3 drivers. There's the mat. So there's the core driver, which is the standard Qi10. There's the Qi10 LS, and then there's the Qi10 Max for those who are trying to distinguish which models we're discussing here. Now, the standard one would be considered like the core model, and the Max would be the more forgiving, potentially more draw bias head. What TaylorMade has done with these drivers is they have created greater separation in the performance characteristics of these club heads. So the LS remains stable, but offers really low spin performance for generally the higher speed players or players that need spin reduction. The core is what's going to fit the majority of golfers and kind of be in that mid category, but still offer low spin and performance maximizing when you have it adjusted properly. And then finally, the Max, which does not have adjustable weighting in the bottom like the LS does, similar to the core model as well. But there is greater change in, as what you notice, James, the internal weighting of this driver. So it offers a little bit more forgiveness. 10 relates to the MOI of the driver, which is not just left to right, which most people think of heel toe weighting for MOI, but high and low on the club face, which when you miss it low on the club face, which tended to be your miss based on your angle of attack, all of a sudden your spin numbers are more normalized to your optimized numbers, and you're seeing that performance benefit. For those who are curious about the models, that's kind of like the real simple breakdown. And when you have that ability to further differentiate each model, it allows golfers like yourself or anyone else out there to really dial into the one that's going to work best for them, versus kind of being stuck in the middle and being like, well, what if this happens or this happens? Could I go to this or that? It really makes the decision-making process a lot easier, especially when you have a fitter.
I want to point out here, you ended up in a split set between the Qi10 4 through 7, and then the P790 in the 8th through which some people, the TaylorMade calls it an A wedge, some people call it a gap wedge, but yeah. That was sort of your setup. Before you ended up in these clubs, had you ever used the split bag before?
So going into this, it was in my head that I knew I could be getting much better performance out of my lower, my 4 to 6 iron. But I wasn't trying to force anything because, being the golf purist that I am, I thought myself above playing with, traditional sort of cavity back high handicappers, high launching iron. But then as we started going through the fitting, again, I didn't know the clubs that I was swinging. I could see the top lines. I could see the difference between some of them. But truthfully, I was swinging the Qi10s and did not even realize. And my launch numbers with those clubs were out of this world. They were absolutely ridiculous. I was hitting the ball like something like 15 yards higher in the, or 15 feet higher in the air. I was seeing the big thing with my irons that Arrow and I found was with my gamers, my angle of descent was totally off. So I would say, okay, I need to hit a 150-yard shot, but I would be landing at such a flat angle that my ball would be carrying far beyond the yardage that I was trying to hit. And that was even the case with my 8-iron, my 9-iron. Every club, I wasn't getting the ball high enough up in the air. So even if I was hitting the right yardage, I wasn't getting, what should have been a 10-foot putt was suddenly a 30-foot putt for me. And this was the case on every green that every iron shot I was playing, I was doing this. And so, no wonder I loved playing courses where I could bomb my driver and then hit a wedge onto the green, because that was the only time that I could get the ball to stop where I wanted it to. So as we kind of went through the process of doing this fitting, the Qi10s on my long irons, my 4 to 7 iron, I was just in love with the performance I was getting. Felt like anywhere that I hit it on the face of the club, it was like almost like swinging with like a 2x4 or something, because I could hit it all the way out on the toe or all the way on the heel, and somehow I was still getting this like absolute max performance. My ball was blasting up in the air. I was hitting this crazy high ball flight. All of my launch numbers were good. My spin was good. Everything looked the way that I wanted it to look, but I was just getting a lot more forgiveness and, was feeling a lot more comfortable and confident over the club. And then as we got down into the scoring irons and, thinking a little bit more about precision, I think honestly, a lot of the reason why I leaned towards the P790 is that was the face that I was sort of used to looking at a little bit more. It was a little bit more comfortable on the top line. And so for me, when I was thinking about, okay, hitting a pitching wedge from 140 yards out, I was thinking, okay, like this is the sort of club and the sort of face that I want to be looking at to feel confident that I can stick it really close. So that was kind of what led to the split decision. But yeah, I was absolutely stunned that I wound up in a set of kind of game improvement clubs. But once I saw the performance that I was getting from them, there was no argument. I couldn't even make the case to Arrow that I deserved to be in the Blades, because the performance was so much better.
It's kind of the running gag when we talk about club fitting is you launch your wedges low and spin really high, but you actually want your longer clubs to launch higher and spin less in many cases, because then it's affected less by the wind. And it's a perfect example of, which is, again, it can be more difficult unless you're in a fitting scenario, but for golfers to really test the irons that they're looking at with the shafts that they're going to get fit into. Because if you were to grab both those irons off the rack, they would have very different shafts in them. So you could say, oh, well, they don't quite feel the same, but maybe if we swap one of these components around, which, you can't just go off the rack and build yourself 2 golf clubs and like switch them out when you're in a store. But in the fitting scenario, when you have the opportunity to go head to head, same shaft in both golf club heads, you can see the performance benefits. And stopping power is something that we continue to stress with irons, because although people will say, yes, iron lofts are stronger, which they are, but part of that is because of the technology in the club face to get the golf ball up in the air. And if you didn't make those lofts stronger, then you would actually start to see too much spin and fluctuation in ball flight because of the wind. So now you're getting higher launch, greater ability to stop it because of the descent angle, which is exactly what you mentioned. So you say you're not a gear nerd, but you're diving into some of these geeky words and terms here. But the ability to land it at an angle which comes in at a steeper angle means that you can stop it faster. And more golfers need to focus on that more than just, hey, in the monitor, in a fitting, I hit my 7-iron 180 yards, but yeah, it only carried 145. Because that is not playable, and that is not going to help you on the golf course. And you saw that. You got that with your longer irons, and then you still got that in your shorter irons as well, but in a club head that, to your eye, especially when hitting different shots, is more preferable, and that's what we always want golfers to find.
I got to look at my launch data from everything that I was doing, and my gamer 7-iron was like a dispersion like this, and all of the other clubs I hit were sort of in this general range. There was, a few that traveled a little bit further, a few that were a little bit shorter, some were, slightly wider dispersion, some were slightly smaller. And then the Qi10 was like 10 yards beyond it, like this. It was literally half the size of the dispersion, and the performance characteristics were all better. Things were, improving for me all the way across. So I looked at Arrow. I was like, well, I'd like to argue with you about this, but like, there's nothing for me to say. Like this is just obviously a better club for me to be fit into.
You ended up with some clubs that, as you're trying to make this journey down to a lower single digit, it feels like your setup is geared to make that jump, which makes me wonder, with so many game-changing clubs now in your bag from this fitting, in your opinion, what was the biggest equipment win for you leaving the kingdom?
I've had the same putter for my entire life. I've been playing a TaylorMade insert putter from the time I was in second grade and went to get, my first set of clubs, or maybe older, fifth grade, and went to get my first set of clubs with my dad. I went into this fitting. I basically said to, everyone at TaylorMade, I'm not getting a new putter. Like, it's like that Nick Saban meme, I'm not going to, so quit asking, because I was not interested. It was not going to happen. So I went through the whole fitting, and right when we were kind of reached the putting side of it, Arrow, my fitter, was like, hey, let me just like take a look at that putter. I noticed you were doing something with it before. I just want to take a look. And he noticed that somehow over the years, the angle of my putter had like gone like 5 degrees in the wrong direction. So I was basically hitting my putts like on a plane like this, which is crazy. And like something I'd never even noticed was going on. And I've used other putters, like never noticed there was a difference. He fixed my sort of upright angle, so it was closer to 90 degrees. And my putter performance was 5 times better after that with this thing that I've been using for my entire life. So that was a big win for me, just as my personal love for my putter and wanting to keep using it. But from a new gear perspective, I would say the biggest win for me was with my low irons with the Qi10. Playing those clubs, I never thought I was going to be the guy that was getting fit into game improvement clubs, particularly not as the dude who showed up as an 8 handicap, hoping to get down to like a 4 or a 3. I thought I would be going the opposite direction. I thought, all right, I'm going to play some blades, or, maybe something that sort of in between a blade and a game improvement club. That was not the case for me. My performance was so much better with the Qi10s. My consistency was so much better. My distance, my speed, my spin, my angle of descent. It was like literally every single launch characteristic that I could look for was better. And that's the sort of thing that like I just didn't believe was kind of possible when you went through a fitting. I just didn't think that was like what happened to actual golfers, and particularly not to me in the previous times that I've gone through fittings. So I am overjoyed at the result of that. I am anxiously awaiting my opportunity to finally put those clubs into action. Once the winter kind of passes here in New York, I will be running out to my nearest golf course and getting around in. But yeah, my performance throughout the bag is significantly better. But with those low irons, I mean, I'm over the moon. I'm so pumped.
Yeah. First, you break 80. Next, consistently 75s. I see it in your future, James.
We're coming for the 60s. I can feel it.
I was going to say, I wasn't going to say it. I'm not going to speak it into existence just yet. But I think with this new gear, that's where you're trying to man. Hey, thanks again for sharing your experience going through a fitting at TaylorMade's Kingdom.